what candidate makes you feel good when Saban leaves? None, right? Like there's nobody that they could hire, maybe outside of Dan Lanning, who's a little bit more experienced in the recruiting realm, that makes you think, okay, well, this is a good hire. I am absolutely and utterly dumbfounded by the notion that a person with as little experience at the Power 5 level could parlay that experience and success at the Power 5 level into the Alabama job. And not just the Alabama job, the taking over for Nick Saban job. And I'm not saying it's a bad hire. I'm not saying he's not going to win. All he's done is win. But I get very, very nervous in my plums when I start talking about a coach who has spent a large portion of his career in the Pacific Northwest, who has never signed a 5-star prospect, who has a recruiting coordinator in Courtney Morgan, who told me on the phone last week that taking top 100 players at Alabama is not recruiting because there's not as much evaluation. When you start talking like that, and I'm not saying Courtney Morgan isn't great, I just wrote a story about how he helped build two. We're going to get to that. But there is an evaluation piece that involves 3 stars, like Mason Graham on the defensive line at Michigan, that is not going to sit well in Tuscaloosa. We are talking about a program that signed 9 5-star prospects in a single recruiting class. A program that has won the recruiting crown like 10 out of the last 13 years. A program that won the recruiting crown 7 years in a row. A program that has won a national championship for every 3-year player up until this past year because it recruits so crazily good. The transfer portal is changing things. NIL is changing things. I know the 247 sports composite isn't necessarily the same predictive tool as it has been in the past. But the person who is taking over for Nick Saban, the best recruiter in the history of college football, is not a dog of a recruiter. That scares the ever-loving shit out of me.
And it's
especially considering what happened at Auburn.
And it's because as much as everyone will always try to spin, we hired our number 1 choice. No, you didn't. And it's okay that you didn't. Pete Carroll was like USC's 5th choice the year he got the job. You know, like sometimes these things work out, but it didn't happen because Kirby Smart was at a better job in Georgia. Steve Sarkisian was at probably a better job in Texas, and Dan Lanning's at Oregon, which is, I probably would have taken the job if I was Dan Lanning, but Oregon's a very, very good job as well that can get you everything you want. So that's the situation Alabama found itself in, because if those top 3 guys pulled out, what if it didn't get past Mike Norvell and Caleb DeBoer, or if it did get past them, I had no idea what was going to happen. That's why Caleb DeBoer had to take this.
If Kalen DeBoer didn't take it, then I don't know what would have happened. And I recognize, and Kenny, I'll go to you on this because you're the beat writer there. You know what's up. There was no answer that was going to make us all feel warm inside. There wasn't a Kirby Smart that was just going to fall out of the sky. And Alabama, I think, is an interesting job. I don't know where it is on the pantheon of great jobs without Saban. Alabama isn't necessarily a talent-rich state in comparison to, places like Louisiana and Texas. I don't understand the geography of that. And they've had some really good years in the past few years in terms of top 100 player talent. But Alabama typically isn't as deep as some of the other southern states that are around it. Alabama has pillaged the state of Florida and has done so because their coach is a dog recruiter. And Jordan here is asking, are we sure he isn't a dog of a recruiter? No, we're not. No, we're not. He could be great. I'm not saying it's not. But when you hire somebody to take over for Nick Saban and it's a question, that's scary. What's your take on all this, Kenny?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's being said. And it goes back to, again, the loss of Travaris Robinson, because you look at his, all-time recruiting wins. It goes far beyond defensive backs. He was able to keep Jordan Burch in the state of South Carolina as a 5-star defensive end. He was one of the lead recruiters for Ryan Williams. And you think about that recruitment and where that's trending now that Robinson isn't going to stay on Alabama staff. You have to feel like that's probably trending away from Alabama. He's a receiver. So you think about all the different kind of hands that he has in all of these different recruitments. It is going to be imperative that DeBoer fills his staff with high-end elite recruiters with Southern ties. That's going to be a huge aspect of it. I think in a lot of ways, the offense will be able to recruit itself, because he has proof of concept there with Washington. But on the defensive end, you're going to have to load that staff with either Alabama guys or SEC guys to be able to reinforce to recruits that even though Nick Saban is leaving, this is still going to be the Alabama defense. And that's where my attention kind of turns to, is how he feels that defensive staff and what they're going to be able to do to get kids to, commit to the program. And I think, again, to your point about how much Saban meant to Alabama from a recruiting aspect, that kind of spoke to what I was talking about earlier with, getting more NIL investments, is, being able to play for the greatest coach of all time. That means a lot on the recruiting trail. You might have a kid that might have a better situation at this school, or he's a, in-state Georgia kid or a Florida kid or whatever. And he's looking at Florida State, Georgia, and saying, I could probably play more here. I can make more money here, but this is Nick Saban. I'm gonna ride with, going with the greatest coach of all time. So it's gonna be an adjustment. I think it'll be really interesting to see what his first recruiting cycle looks like. Are the Alabama fans gonna be in an uproar if it's not a top 5 class or a top 10 class? Yeah, they probably.
Yeah.
Kenny, I don't think they've been outside of the top 5 since 2010 or something.
Yeah, they've
Top
only
3 even, yeah.
they've only been
three,
out of the they've only been out of the top 3 twice in the last in the last 15 years or whatever.
And it was number 5.
So, right.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a huge adjustment period, and it's kind of a projection hire. I think, Greg Byrne kind of has a track record of doing this, and I know it's not the same, obviously, but he hired Nate Oates from Buffalo, which was, mid-major, and he was a proven winner at that level. He brought him into the men's basketball program, and now Alabama basketball is recruiting at a clip that they've never recruited at in their history. Mm-hmm. So he turned out to be a maven recruiter and a good basketball coach. So I think that in some ways Byrne is kind of projecting out for Kalen DeBoer of, okay, he hasn't gotten these recruiting wins. He necessarily hasn't had to at Washington, but that doesn't mean he can't do it. Obviously, he knows how to win, which is the most important thing. So that's what I would say, I guess, to maybe keep some Alabama fans' nerves at ease, is that Greg Byrne is kind of projecting out, and his track record of hiring has been, pretty strong in his tenure.